This is Andy Stanley, pastor of Megachurch North Point Community Church in Alpharetta, Georgia. He recently hosted a conference for families and clergy people and pastors of the LGBTQ, and the church world is going collectively out of its ever-loving mind. So let's talk about how everything that's different is an existential crisis to the church is breaking the church and what we can do to fix it.
Yeah, I know, like, this isn't like a red coffee cup.
Yeah.
So, like, why are people getting all bent out of shape about this one?
I know. Hey, before we get started, I need to show you this because I am going to make the rest of your life miserable with this. Watch this.
Oh, what fresh hell.
And I don't even need to touch the keyboard. I can just do this. And this.
There's a reason I don't install software like this on my computer.
And
it's because I like people and I don't want to punish them.
Thank you, Mac OS 10, OS X Sonoma, for those built-in webcam features.
How many of those are in iOS 17?
So far, 8 of them that I know of. And so,
oh, no.
And so yes. All right. So back to business. Andy Stanley, no stranger to being a lightning rod. Although I don't think this is so much about being a lightning rod. I think they have privately been doing this in their church, kind of like these sessions on how family members can reconnect with their kids and how clergy can relate to their kids. And now they've decided it's time to roll this out in a big way, because when you roll it out in big ways, there's lots of big PR and therefore lots of big money to be made, right? With books and DVDs and streaming and one-on-one counseling, all sorts of money to be made. But yeah, so that's what they've done. They've had a national conference recently, and the church world has gone crazy. So I just have a few details about it, and then we can talk about how it breaks the church.
Right on.
So Stanley himself has been trying to walk this tightrope, right? On the one hand, building this conference that says, look, this is a church that's going to minister to the LGBTQ, and we think all churches should. So on the one hand, as far as this church goes, the LGBTQ are no longer second-class citizens. But just to make sure he doesn't make anybody too mad, he continues to toe the line of, we have always taught that marriage is between a man and a woman, and we have not changed that teaching. And as far as we're concerned, biblical marriage is a marriage between a man and a woman. So trying to have the best of both in there, trying to minister to one group while still trying to toe the company line on the other hand, which is interesting considering, like, if you're going to go, if you're going to be David against Goliath, there's not a whole lot of benefit in trying to hem and haw. You have to grab your stones and be ready to fight. Yeah. And then the criticism has been fairly obvious, right? Fairly obvious.
Yeah, of course.
Anything other than the full-throated denunciation of all that is LGBTQ plus alphabet is unchristian, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the dichotomy.
I'm proud of you for using the phrase full-throated, talking about this subject. I get on the one side how you have churches who want to try to, to ride this line, like use the word tightrope. So I'm thinking of like something like riding a bicycle on a tightrope. It's like they want to be there. They want to feel safe. It's like, well, this is what we have to do. But it's like, there's just so many ways to err on all sorts of sides of this.
Yeah.
But I at least give them props for trying, which is a lot more than many churches and pastors are willing to do.
I find the criticism and the blowback to be interesting because basically it all comes back to some variation of they want their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And my thing is, what human being on the face of the earth doesn't want their cake and eat it too? Who doesn't want, like, who in their life wants to make a decision between wealth and poverty? That's not the decision we want to make is between wealthy and uber wealthy. Can I have the Porsche and the Corvette, or the Porsche or the Corvette? Those are the kind of decisions we want to make. Not, can I have the Corvette or the bus pass? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So this argument always drives me crazy because it's fundamentally an argument that says human beings shouldn't be human.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And, I feel like there's a line that like a church, can cross, and it will be in threat of like losing its denominational affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like, and covenant churches, the denomination that I'm in, right. So it's like, if pastors do certain things, or if churches elect certain things, then that church can be disfellowshipped.
Right.
Which is really unfortunate, but you can really go a long way. And like, you could have, LGBT people on, in leadership, serving everywhere in the church. And like, I'm not sure if Andy Stanley really has the chutzpah to go that far or not. I'm not sure what the line is that he's willing to go, because you can try to sit there and say like, oh, we want to welcome you, we want to serve you. But if you're not willing to go as far as you can, then you're just rejecting people, but with a smile on your face.
That's a good point. That you make a really good point. And the other interesting thing is, like many megachurches, Andy Stanley enjoys a certain level of protection and isolation and insulation from blowback, right? It doesn't matter if a denomination disaffiliates North Point Community Church. They're humongous. They give far more money. Far more money goes out the door in aid to others than comes in the door through any sort of denominational affiliation. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Far more churches benefit downstream from the money they make than they benefit from the money that small churches bring in. So in one sense, like if somebody like Andy Stanley isn't going to push the boundaries, and like people like Rick Warren aren't going to push the boundaries in terms of women in leadership, then nobody is, because nobody is as popular and as well protected from real blowback as these guys are.
Yeah, which may be the only positive thing like any of us have ever said about mega churches.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that's true. Like, I guess the benefit of a megachurch is you have the runway, and the love of the people that you can do the big bold things that need to be done.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that this week we had this headline, and the other headline which we talked about, the one of the Pope, blessing same-sex unions.
Yeah.
Which is for the Catholic Church like a real just severe move in that direction. I mean, they still don't want to call it marriage,
right?
Because you have to make some people happy, I guess. But blessing, as you said, but what's the difference really? If you're blessing the union, you're blessing the union.
Yeah. So for anybody not aware, there's a big meeting, all the Catholic leaders, which of course includes the Pope, and there's definitely language and hints and rumors that there is going to be a positional shift of some kind when it comes to recognizing or blessing the union of the LGBTQ in the Catholic Church. So yeah, I guess in a sense we do need these larger than life people who are in a sense beyond what we would think of as normal accountability, right? They're kind of the untouchables in that way, But let's switch gears and let's talk about how this breaks the church a little bit, okay?
Sure.
So this is a point that I keep coming back to over and over, and I'm astounded. Like we put out a short one time, and on TikTok this continues to be the most commented video we put out, where it was a short, so it wasn't even 30 seconds, where I talked about my disappointment with the splitting of the United Methodist Church over the LGBTQ issue. And we continue to get comment after comment after comment of how the church needs to hold the line, right? And anybody who doesn't hold the line is not a real Christian, right? And I'm amazed how often I have to explain to people that there's no such thing as a singular universal theology. What we think about God and the nature of truth and the nature of holiness and how to live in peace with God and one another, that has all morphed over time. Different faith traditions interweave with one another. And as societal pressures and individual pressures and political pressures come to bear on these things, they change and they become whatever needs to become for these faith traditions to keep moving and keep doing the work that they were put on this earth to do. And that has always been the case. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to accept that the things that we believe today have very little to do with the things that were believed 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, like there's a lot of, novel beliefs that exist in, various churches and denominations today, and by novel, I don't necessarily mean like from the 1970s. I mean, it could have been from like the 1570s,
Yeah.
Because that's a lot newer. That's a lot closer to us than it was to, the Apostle Paul. But yeah, it's just this idea that there's no universal theology is something that a lot of, Christians and pastors have no excuse for this, but like, so many pastors still do. Like, they just don't understand. Like, look, your version of Christianity is not the only version of Christianity. It's not, it doesn't, like, there's nothing to say that you are the most right about it. And there's nothing that says that we can't change as a church how we understand something, because time tends to reveal more and more information.
Exactly.
And it just kind of goes to that like problem that I have with, things like Answers in Genesis, right? Where like, it's just like, they want to remain ignorant of like science just so they can keep pumping out their same theological point of view.
Yeah. And I get it. And I know you get it too. Like the gravitational pull, like this, it's so attractive. This desire to want to find a singular truth, to find the ultimate answer to the question of life, the universe, and everything. Right? 42. Yeah. Right. The appeal of that, of finding that answer it's a drug, but the problem is people who start pursuing that get so tunnel vision that they forget that there's actually a whole nother mission the church is supposed to be about. That bring once again, we keep grinding this axe, bringing the kingdom here to earth. For anybody who hasn't watched the show before, we are really hardcore believers that the church exists to make the lives of other people better in measurable ways. And so like these other pursuits, as noble as they are, get in the way of the actual mission, So that's my first thing that breaks the church.
Yeah. And just to, bring something maybe a little bit scriptural to this.
Yeah. No, man, don't do that. Why do you want to bring in scripture into it? Man, hit me.
I know. And of course, like, I need to go. Oh, of course, iOS updates got to just make everything janky.
Thanks, Apple.
Yeah. So, I'm like, so this past Sunday when I preached, I ended up quoting some Matthew because, of course, like the section I was teaching on in John, it was, Jesus saying, it's like, look, you turn to the scriptures because you think in them you have eternal life, but you don't come to me. And to that effect, we have, Matthew 23, chapter 23, verse 23. We have, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint and dill and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. I had to add, keep that last line in there just because it adds so much,
Yeah.
But it's that idea that so many Christians are worried about the mint and the dill, the cumin. So like they're obsessed with, well, is like what is LGBT stuff, and that's and that it's kind of unfair to shove all those letters together because they represent some very disparate things. But it's just like they're so concerned about that being a problem that they're forgetting about mercy and justice, and they're not doing that.
Yeah. So
it's like, I feel like if you wanna say it's the devil, then we can say it's the devil. I think it's going to use that tool of LGBTQ plus issues to keep the church from actually being effective and from doing what it's supposed to be doing. Like this is a distraction.
Yeah.
And I think Andy Stanley is moving in the right direction of trying to make it less of a distraction, even though he's kind of inadvertently distracting others, but you know, what can we do about
Right.
that?
That's just the unintended consequence of doing something that gets the spotlight. Totally. All right. My next thing. Old guard pastors conveniently forget all the biblical examples of God's working through those who would openly oppose him. Think of something as simple as the Passover, right? All of Egypt saw Israel as nothing more than forced labor. They were nothing more than muscle. And they weren't even hired muscle, right? They're enslaved muscle. And yet, it is through these Egyptians that we get this beautiful tradition that now has served us well for literally thousands of years, where we take a day to remember God's mercy on us. You know, something like Judas betraying Jesus is an example. If we're going to call it God's plan inhabits and circles and takes into account those who don't even call themselves gods, or those who would turn their back on God, those who haven't developed maturity to turn away from gold when the choice is between gold and Jesus, right? And God's plan encompasses all of that. And there is no need for us to make enemies unnecessarily of those that God has already put into motion for his own purposes, you know?
Yeah, it's like you say, like the old guard conveniently forgets.
Yeah.
You know that I like that. I like that turn of phrase. But like, there's another part of me that's just kind of like, yeah, I don't think they care either.
That's
like,
yeah.
I don't think they care to remember that.
Right.
And I think it's just because when you have somebody else that you can point to them and say, okay, oh, hey, yeah, you're coming after me. You're attacking me. You're the one that's trying to undo everything I believe in. And then you can villainize somebody else, and then they become an enemy, and then you can feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I'm the victim here. Like, I'm not the victimizer. I'm the victim.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, the truth is, I think, you know, really is that it comes down to, it's like they complain about being attacked on all these fronts because they see their church is shrinking and they need to blame somebody.
Yeah.
So they need to complain about, you know, atheists or LGBTQ plus or whoever else, just so that they can fail and feel like they still have dignity about it, even though it's their failings that are the cause.
Preach it, brother. Preach. Cool. I like the rhythm. I like the rhythm of that. I think.
Have you been drinking?
No, tea. My throat's been hurting, so decaf tea is what is on the agenda every morning and every night. Decaf tea, my brother.
Yes, I'm drinking my Truly here.
So clearly, you and I have beef with the people who want to crush any attempt to build bridges between the church and the LGBTQ. I really do think that the fix for this is fairly remedial. Like, I don't think this is an incredible theological conundrum to solve our way out of, right? The two greatest laws, the two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God, love one another. Every Christian in a very early part of their path is understanding this verse, that there were so many times in Jesus' life that people, or even the serpent, would try to trip him up. That theological puzzles, doctrinal puzzles, intellectual puzzles, right? And this was another one of these where the leaders of the time wanted to get this false Messiah off their radar, right? And one way to do it would be to find him in some sort of theological error. Because how could the Messiah be in theological error, right? And Jesus reminds us that love is the law. Love is what is given from God, and love is what we give back to God, and love is what we give to one another. And everything else falls by the wayside if love is not involved. And not love like, oh, well, speaking truth is love, or my version of love is love. No. It's like love as the person who needs it. Love. That is the love we're talking about here. Love God as he needs it. Love people as they need it. And everything else can work itself out somehow. And I think that is the fix. That people need to stop playing intellectual games, theological games, apologetic games. All you apologists out there who love doing that kind of spiritual trigonometry, y'all need to stop, rewind, and ask yourself, am I proceeding with an arrogant heart, wanting to prove people right or wrong? Am I proceeding with an agenda? Or am I just proceeding in love? And does everything I say and do proceed out of love? You know? And you know when it doesn't, because unloving things are the things that hurt people, right? Unloving things are the things that cause people to go away. Unloving things are the things that cause people to want to commit suicide or to think of themselves as less than, right? And so you know when you're being loving, because that's when you're building people up. That's when you're bringing people in. That's when you're inspiring, helping people to find themselves in this whole process. That's love.
Yeah, and I think that will land the plane. Because like I did want to suggest that radical transparency was needed.
Yeah.
And accountability, but like, I just can't use it for every episode, right?
Yeah. Well, actually we could, and it would be quite appropriate. But yeah, sometimes you need to come at it from a different perspective. Right? And hey, Mark.
What? I thought it wasn't going to work.
If you watch this episode, you may think that Mark and I really have the mother of all axes to grind with the church. But nothing could be further from the truth. Mark and I love the church. We love its mission. We want to see God glorified. We are just in absolute astonishment of the things that churches do to hurt themselves and hurt the larger church in the process. Words is hard. And this is where we come to talk about it, so that when churches ask the question, why doesn't anybody take us seriously? Here's your answer. You're welcome. So please, if you've got something to say, leave us a comment or a review, or hit those thumbs up and thumbs down and super likes and super thanks and click. And if you really want to write your long letter to us, shoot us an email at churcheslanepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you got something out of this particular conversation and you want to see more conversations just like this, click up somewhere around here for our playlist called Theological Theater. Thanks a lot.